Hello, Dr. Ladies. I had to because that's just my fact. We'll get there, but that is possibly the most quoted thing between me and my sister, only because you can just pull it out at any time. It doesn't have to mean anything. Anyway, but back to business. Hello.
This episode of the Hammerbarn Project is called Bravery 101.
You are listening to the Hammerbarn Project with me, Brendan.
This is me, Frank.
And this is me, Marty.
And do we say it again? Martin's in the room?
Yay!
We can say
He's in the room.
We can say that it's not always the case because Marty, of course, lives in Sydney. Frank and I live in Adelaide.
My heart lives in Adelaide.
Oh, little fella.
And I also come back sometimes.
Sometimes I walk past your heart and go, oh, if only the rest of Marty were here. That's disgusting.
Wow.
And it makes no sense. So how far in are we?
Yeah, it's a good time to call it, I think.
Yeah. We are here and we're going to talk about the show Bluey because it's the best show. So why would we talk about another show when we could be talking about the best show?
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Early Baby.
This episode of Bluey is called Early Baby.
I didn't know that I knew this episode because the lads told me to watch it. And so what did I do?
You didn't.
I didn't.
Yep.
But Frank's got a nice big TV. So I said to Marty, like, if our podcast were about, like, watching movies, then I'd be a pretty bad friend if I got here and hadn't watched the movie. But there's 7 minutes for crying out loud. So I just thought, I'll just watch it at Frank's place when I get there. And then we put it on. And I went, hang on, is this the episode where Rusty just says, hello, Dr. Lady? And
I know this episode.
I know this episode. I've watched it so many times, especially that bit.
I've got that bit tattooed on me.
Yeah, look, here. Let's go straight into Barkdown time, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
This episode is really an homage to Johann Huizinga's idea of the magic circle and just like 2 intersecting magic circles, a breakdown between the different rule sets. But no, it's about basically the kids are playing 2 different games, one of which is about an early baby, and then there's sort of a breakdown, and we get to progressively find out and almost, I was going to say Memento sort of style thing, but there are better episodes that like reflect Memento. But, you know, in a backwards, in a, whodunit sort of scenario, we get to find out what actually happened and why they're annoyed at each other.
Could be one of those things, 7 minutes earlier. Like, you see the other half of the story.
Ding, ding.
Now, in fairness, this is probably the first episode we've recorded where there's characters who are outside of the main 4 members of the family. This episode
expanded universe.
Yeah, this
Bluey
episode
characters.
appears late in season 1, but for us, as far as the episodes we've spoken to, this is the first time we've seen the likes of Rusty, Coco,
Oh, man, you're right.
Honey,
Snickers,
Indy.
Indy, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, man,
they're nearly
yeah.
all in there, yeah.
Calypso, I think this is the first time it's
Correct.
the first one we've got.
We've done with Calypso,
with
yeah.
the school.
Man, she's super zen.
Oh, it's so sad.
She just
With
fixes
like
everything.
neckerchief.
I need a Calypso in my life
Oh.
to fix everything.
I think we all do.
Voiced, of course, by Megan Washington.
Correct.
I know a couple of people who are huge Megan Washington fans, and when they found that out, they were just
Oh, love her even more.
absolutely perfect choice, as
Yes.
always.
Good casting.
That school, actually, as a side note, I don't know anything about this. I should have researched once again. Didn't.
Hey.
But my sister Erin was looking into it because she suspected that, and this is the first time we've been to their school on an
Correct. In
episode.
our
So
show,
why not
yeah.
talk about it now?
Yeah.
And but she was like, I wonder what sort of education style the school is, and she thought, is it like a Montessori sort of style? But she looked into it, Waldorf schooling, and she thinks that maybe that's the kind of denomination, if you will, of the school, because there's a lot of focus on play. And imagination, and even down to the toys. Like, I probably shouldn't even be saying this because she was telling me, and this is totally secondhand, and I might have not even been listening when she was telling me about it. But some of the toys that they had, like the little gnomes that rock up in a lot of stuff. So and also the little canopy with the little wooden thing with the curtain and everything. So if anybody actually knows anything about childhood education, as I do not, and wants to get in touch with me and say, Brendan, what are you talking about? Please go ahead and do so.
I think, regardless, is a very interesting style of education for us to be seeing in this show. Like the pedagogy of they just get to kind of play and interact. And, sorry.
As someone who works in a school, I'm triggered by that word because I think it's absolute nonsense. But anyway.
Anyway, this is not the pedagogy podcast. I'll be doing that one later. This is the podcast where I tell you about just the idea of having Calypso there as this guide character who like puts the kids together in other episodes. It's kind of like, oh, why don't you play with this person and all that. Like it doesn't guide it very heavily, but it's just. But
she is a good catalyst for engagement. And
in this one, she's like really playing mediator of this argument and trying to piece together the story, which is really nice. I always get worried when I watch it once and I don't take many notes. I'm like, oh, am I just not going to have... Am I just not resonating with this episode? And then I watched it a second time and just the two different types of narratives that are going on in the two different stories. So on the first hand, you've got the early baby story. And that one gets me, actually, because it's obvious, it's a fairly
heavy topic for a kid's show. Yeah.
And I have to ask you guys, because, she's sort of retelling the story. She says Indy wanted to play early baby like her sister. Or like her. I couldn't figure... I don't know which way it goes in terms of, like, her sister was... She's got an older sister who has got a mum, or her sister was... an early baby, was a premature baby.
Oh, well, my mind went straight to the latter, but but if you've listened to it and it's ambiguous, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to play either way. And the moment that gets me the most is when they do the little back and forth about, you're going to have to tell me to go home, but I'm going to pretend that I don't want to go home. And there's that moment where they're like, oh, okay, yep, no, we'll go along with this. And then the reaction, you can tell, is just over and atop what they thought it was going to be. And then I just start thinking, like, okay, how does Indy know about this situation and this reaction? Yeah. And that just starts to build additional levels and those minor points that your brain starts to create this wider universe about. Well, that just gets me.
I see it time and time again, the way this show touches on some really heavy issues like that. It does it like and roll up that newspaper again because we were just in the Hammer Barn episode where we were speaking about Winton, the helicopter episode as well. The idea of
where's my dad's house? I don't know, but he doesn't live with my mum.
Yeah, the idea of like serious family life issues that are no joke.
It's like they acknowledge it without sort of,
and they paint it. They paint that picture using the brush of the children's experience. Like they're the kids telling the story, and Indy wants to play the scenario of what happened to her sister, be her sister the mum or the baby. And it's a way that I don't know if anything else is doing it, but it's just such a awesome channel to discuss these issues through the eyes of the innocent eyes
using play as a medium to unpack something that's obviously in some way still thinking, trying to figure out. And there's another episode which that's going to be interesting when we get to that one, which unpacks this in greater detail. But just having hints of that here is super interesting.
Indy knows a lot about the process. You've got to wash your hands. You've got to. We need a fish tank that's got holes in it.
She likes reading
lines. That's cool. So to me, your question about how does she know about this? We can assume she's the same age as Blue, which makes her 6 years old.
Yep.
So therefore, I look at it as she's got a younger sister, and this all happened, let's say, even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, even as a 4-year-old, they're very aware of what's going on, and she learnt all that from her younger sister. Yeah. That's how I read it.
Seeing her mum in that position.
Exactly. Mums aren't allowed to stay, and mum was really upset she couldn't stay at the hospital, all that sort of stuff. And again, it's one of these, you're playing that scenario in your head, where in screen time, that whole thing takes place in a minute and a half.
I'll say this, I don't mind talking about this heavier... Well, we've been on this topic for a while and might be for a chunk of the episode, but I think it's fair enough because it's a heavy episode and it's worth talking about. But I will check myself and say, I'm very good at starting to talk about a topic without thinking that
where this train of thought's going.
That first and foremost. But actually,
how the sentence will finish,
how the next sentence will even begin. Around people who like you guys are both dads. And so I do feel a little out of my depth when I'm speaking about the way kids respond to pregnancy and the way adults respond to like their first pregnancy or complications with the pregnancy. But I no less want to mention, if there were a what resulted Willie's whimper moment in this, it's what you touched on. Like, now you have to be the bravest you've ever been to go home, because I mean, it seems silly from me. I'll put this disclaimer one more time and then I'll actually talk. It seems silly for me to say how much that moment moves me and talk about the people that I know have been in that situation where you guys have been closer and in that situation and I've not. But the idea of a mum having to go home from hospital, I'll be a grateful man if I never have to do anything in my life a tenth as hard as that must be. And just to see it being dealt with by kids in this play environment, that's a huge thing.
You would take down the dragon, though.
I think you would. Thank you.
You're Rusty.
That is the biggest compliment anyone's ever paid me.
It is just a sausage dragon. He puts up a good fight.
But what I'm saying, Brendan, is I think you could take down a sausage dragon. Thanks, man.
It's really interesting to have those two things compared to one another. Obviously, they're linked together by being the bravest you've ever been. And,
sure.
So Rusty starts retelling the story like Louis was doing, of like, well, we were doing this. And then without his voice tone changing much, it's just kind of like that camera angle changes. We're actually in the story of the little people. People. And as soon as it goes to that, I just go to Jim Henson's The Storyteller. I'm not sure if you guys ever saw that sort of stuff.
Can't say I have.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully there's somebody out there who's listening.
I mean, I probably have, and it's probably somewhere back there. And if you start talking about it, I'll have this catharsis.
It's just like all these episodic shows, and it would just be a different fable from around the world told by different means, but it was always people from the Jim Henson's Creature Shop sort of building stuff. But it is that idea of a storyteller bringing you into a space of these classic sort of fables. And so we have the classic princess gets taken by the dragon, albeit in a slightly different form because she volunteers. A little bit more woke that way, hopefully. And just having the comparison between those two stories, we got kind of like the fantasy being the bravest that you've ever been, which kids are probably far more familiar with from all the narratives that we sort of hear, all those fantasy narratives. But then that being paired with the very real sense of like having to be brave because you don't want to leave your new child behind in the hospital. Man.
And it's a really nice moment when that story gets introduced and why it gets introduced, because the girls tell their story and there's just that beautiful moment where Rusty's like, I get it now. Yeah. And then they're just about to go back to playing because that's enough for Rusty. He understands. And then Calypso goes, just before you go,
a second.
What were you gonna say? What were you doing? And then they're just like, and Rusty's just in a throwaway. I was just. And then there's this amazing story that could have just been glazed over. And the girls are like, let's do that.
They get just as amazed by his story. I love the texture of those little wooden creatures. There's the bit where they say
wooden dog people.
Yeah,
but nobody would.
Yeah, and they just twist, just shaking in the spot. And the way they choose who goes to the dragon, was it Ip Dip Sky Blue?
Yeah, we're just gonna sidestep that one.
And Ip Dip Sky Blue does sound like a much more acceptable children's rhyme than some of the ones that would have still been knocking around when we were kids. Thank God.
Right. Star of this episode, I'm not sure who it is for you, but I really like Snickers. I think Snickers is my favourite expanded universe. And you have that brilliant little moment of like, we've just had that really heavy experience of, okay, they're taking Indy home and she just goes off shot and then Snickers just comes in and just rah!
Yeah, and it's before you've even heard that side of the
out of context. You're like, where did that come from?
I think it's going to come back.
And this nice little link that is like really emphatic so you know where it comes in.
Yeah.
So it cuts the two different things together. But I just love the fight that they have. Rusty retelling the fight. And he's just like doing all the actions when he's there with Calypso. And just that moment where, because Snickers is wearing this tail to be the dragon, and he gets it pulled off and it whacks Rusty in the face when he pulls it off.
Oh, you just reminded me of this amazing little thing. Like, I'll hold on to it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that art is over. Yeah, you're good.
Are you good? Yeah. Okay. When Rusty, and I just noticed it just today, when Rusty picks up the baby, he just like licks his thumb.
Yes, I saw that.
And just like smudges like maybe some dirt off the baby's face.
Yeah. Like, it's very quick.
Oh man, it's really subtle. And it's just like what my mum used to do when dropping me off to primary school.
Because
and I hated it. I don't want you spit on my face, Mum.
Snickers' delivery of it's just so underplayed. I just love it so much. Of just like, this looks more like more like an Ori. He's like, because it's just outside the game. He's just been playing that dragon so hard.
And there's so much of that throughout dragon. So many episodes in Bluey where they're playing, and then there's just a break in that moment, and they just go and like it's just it's so kid, and then they're straight back into it. That kind of good-natured play. It just gets me every time. No, I'll use this. This looks way more like okay. And then when it picks him up after defeating the dragon, just a little licking thing. It's so sweet.
I love the seeing Rusty's like sword and shield and helmet. You can tell it's made out of cardboard because it's got the little corrugation through it. Which brings me to my one doggy treat for this episode.
Ooh, please do.
In the scene where there's Calypso and she's mediating everything. On the right hand of screen, there are the red Roman shields that the terriers use from one of the other episodes that we've yet to get to. And where they're the protecting Romans with their amazing accent. Probably the only other one, it's not so much a doggy treat, but did anybody notice the weather in this episode?
Yeah,
it's raining. And then right at the end when Indy realizes how noble Rusty was, I guess, and she goes, Rusty, let's play mums and dads. Okay. Background, rain stopped, rainbow across the sky.
Oh, that's nice. I did notice, like, every time that they play the scream moment, there's some lightning that comes down in the background just to make that more emphatic.
And that goes into something that we haven't done in a while, the for real life segment.
Yep.
And I just think anytime when it's at school and it's raining, it takes me back to like those primary school days of when it was raining and you couldn't play outside because it was a bit too muddy. Yep. But I went to quite a small school in like a semi-rural town where,
because you described it as being muddy outside when it gets wet, as opposed to where I grew up, where it was like the asphalt,
the concrete gets slippery,
and you could die, not just
or even like, just like you get wet from the rain that comes from the sky, and people probably don't
that's a problem.
Anyway, like yes, tell us more about this muddy rural farm school that you went to. How many miles did you have to go in the morning to get there?
Just uphill all the way and all the way back. I do remember walking to school those days, and you had your gumboots. I loved wearing gumboots to that school because it meant that when you got there, you got them off, and then you got to be in your socks. Because like this school was like a tiny school. I was maybe like if it had 40, 45 kids, it was a good year, and so it was just this small building that we were in, and there were carpet bowls, and the lads brought out the carpet bowls, and we just like played that at recess, and it was just maybe because I was never really a sporty kid. The idea of being inside and playing like the board games and stuff. Man, I would be lying if I said that watching this episode didn't bring back pleasant memories of rainy days at Paracon Primary School.
Yeah. Nice. I think I had the same sort of experience. It's just that establishing shot of just like, it's wet and it's at school.
Yeah.
They're all indoors.
You just, for some reason, it's just like that damp carpet smell of just like a few people that come in. It's just like a little bit wet.
And you don't want to get that carpet muddy. That's why that's why you got to stay inside.
Yeah.
Not the asphalt thing.
And just, getting out the board games and just having to sit around and just like, or even just like the heater being on. Anyway, it's very evocative.
Yeah.
But it's okay, guys. I've got a wet flannel.
We didn't talk about that. Like the third delivery of that line. Well, I can use my wet flannel. Like
finally, I'm relevant in the game.
She does actually get to use the wet flannel when she's trying to get Indy to sleep. So that's so satisfying. I think the other moment for me that's really satisfying is just Calypso walks out and she's like, good boy, Rusty. Gives him a pat on the head in that very dog-like fashion. Yeah. And he's just so enamored by that because he just watches her go off shot. And it's not until Indy starts speaking to him again that he's
still standing there, isn't he?
He's still sort of standing there looking off, and he's just like, oh, I'm a good boy. It's so nice.
With all these other characters, like all Bluey's friends, it is very easy to see the need for like that rolled up newspaper to come out and tell us off and threaten us for mentioning other episodes outside of school. Pardon the pun.
Hey!
But yeah, I do love Rusty, and I think it's not saying too much. You put that roll up newspaper down. It's not saying too much to say that he does feature in very heavily in probably my favorite episode, which we'll get to. And I'll leave it at that for now. Leave it there. Speaking of leaving it there, shall we?
Why not?
Why not? Thank you, as always, for joining us. Thank you, Frank, for being on the old, or what is it? I got it wrong the other day.
The
ones and zeros.
The ones and zeros.
The ones and zeros. I said ones and twos.
A computer.
Because I'm so smart. But thank you, man, for just having the stuff, having me round, having us round.
Hey! All of us here.
Hey. Which leads me into... Thanks, Marty.
Hey, no
for being around.
It's so good to be here today.
Oh, man. We have to do this again sometime.
Yes.
But until that time, you will always find us at your local hammer barn, aisle 300.
Left at the fake grass.
If you see a flamingo, you've gone too far.
It's a boy!
Yeah. No, it needs to be a girl.
It's a girl!